Reconciliation is a deeply personal journey, and I encourage you to learn more about the 94 calls to justice in the report of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. The indignity, injustices, and discrimination that Indigenous peoples continue to endure weakens the fabric of our entire society. Colonization, assimilationist policies, and the scars inflicted by residential schools have damaged cultures and kinships and have resulted in distressing gaps in health outcomes and living conditions between Indigenous and non-Indigenous people. OSSTF is an educational organization which represents teacher and education worker members. Our central office is in the community of Scarborough in Toronto, but we have 35 district offices across Ontario. In the 1950s, when Scarborough was being developed, a Wendat burial site was uncovered on the spot where Tabor Hill Park sits, and that's close to our office in Toronto. The Wendat peoples, who the Europeans called the Huron, practiced a special burial ceremony, and they dug out individual graves and cleaned each of the bones thoroughly. And they had a celebration where they dug and filled a trench with the mixed bones. The mound was created when the earth was laid on top to cover the bones. These mounds can be found in different areas across Toronto. And when you encounter one, it's important to remember that you're in the presence of a sacred place. Today, I'm speaking to you from Guelph, which is situated on treaty land that is steeped in rich Indigenous history and home to many First Nations, Inuit, Métis, and mixed ancestry people. Today, I recognize the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation of the Anishinaabe people. The Dish with One Spoon is a treaty between the Anishinaabe, Mississaugas, Haudenosaunee that bound them to share the territory and protect the land. Subsequent Indigenous nations and peoples, Europeans, and newcomers have been invited into this treaty in the spirit of peace, friendship, and respect in the traditional territory I'm speaking to you from today. It's my wish that we can carry the spirit of peace, friendship, and respect into this special gathering today. I thank generations of people who were stewards of this land for thousands of years before my family settled here. And now I'd like to happily introduce our president of the Ontario Secondary School Teachers Federation, Harvey Bischof. Harvey is an English teacher from the Durham region and is the president of our union. Harvey grew up in Pickering, Ontario, where he attended elementary and high school. He earned a Bachelor of Arts degree from Trent University and a Master of Arts degree and Bachelor of Education degree at Queen's University. He returned to the Durham area to teach English at Henry Street High School and then at Exeter High School. Harvey served as the local OSSTF FEESO, and FEESO is our French initials for our union, District 13 Durham Chief Negotiator and President before his election to the provincial executive in 2007 as an executive officer. In 2011, Harvey was elected as a provincial vice president and then as our president in 2017. Harvey believes strongly in evidence-informed practice in education and evidence-based decision-making in public policy. He is a vocal advocate for a strong publicly funded education system with inclusive, full-service schools that offer robust and accessible supports for all students. An accomplished labor negotiator, he is also a coalition builder who has forged strong alliances within the labor movement at the provincial, national, and international levels. Harvey is often sought out by the media as an articulate and an authoritative voice on education issues in Ontario. Thank you and welcome to our webinar, and I will turn it over to Harvey.
Thanks, Tracy. And as I turn to introducing the panelists, I want to also take a moment to thank them. These are people who wear many hats, who have enormous pressures on their time, and I'm so grateful that they would take the time to join us this evening. Start with our first panelist, Laura Kirby McIntosh, past president of the Ontario Autism Coalition. Laura is the proud mother of two beautiful teenagers on the autism spectrum, her son, Clifford, and her daughter, Clara. She's an award-winning teacher with over 25 years of classroom experience and a proud member of OSSTF District 19. Laura is an experienced writer and a longtime political organizer and activist. She's written curriculum for the Ministry of Education, has worked as both a writer and an editor for two major education publishers. Since 2018, she's Until very recently, she served as the president of the Ontario Autism Coalition. Laura's journey as an autism mother and advocate began in 2003 when her son Clifford was diagnosed with ASD. Her daughter Clara was diagnosed in 2006. Though both kids have had their challenges, they are now happy and outspoken teenagers, and Laura is convinced that they have made her a much better educator. Laura has learned the art of speaking truth to both those in power and the media. She's appeared on Global TV, City, CTV News, CBC's Metro Morning, and CBC's Power and Politics. She's met with premiers, cabinet ministers, deputy ministers, and MPPs, and has provided autism briefings to senior officials in the provincial government. Most recently, she served as a member of the Ontario Autism Program Advisory Panel. Theresa Pastore is the Executive Director of Parents Engaged in Education. Theresa has been involved in the field of parent education for the past 20 years. She's been involved as a volunteer parent leader at the school, local, and regional levels. She's also spent 13 years as a classroom volunteer parent in grade 1, where she enjoyed supporting students who required extra support to achieve their academic goals. Her past responsibilities have included being president of a regional parent association, director of a provincial parent association, trustee constituency assistant charged with school council training, and a parent engagement consultant to a major school board in Ontario. As volunteer executive director of her organization, Theresa is committed to empowering parent leaders across the province to support their schools and students in their community. Shameela Shakeel is co-founder of York Communities for Public Education. With an educational background in applied developmental psychology, Shameela currently works as a mental health professional in private practice in York Region. As a parent of 4 children ranging in age from 18 through 10 years old, she's been an active volunteer in her children's schools and the community for nearly 15 years. Through her volunteer work, she realized that there was a definite need for parents to amplify their voices regarding policies and procedures in schools, particularly concerning the safety and mental health needs of students and educators. She's the current chair of the Newmarket Parent Network, which organizes a successful parent engagement speaker series each school year. Shameela is also a co-chair of York Communities for Public Education, a grassroots advocacy group made up of parents, educators, students, and community allies. Nicole Cummings-Morgan, OCT, RECE, and co-founder of Black Early Childhood Educators. Nicole has over 20 years of working experience in early childhood education and has worked with children and families in settings that range from childcare to youth neighborhood programs. As a recent graduate from the Master of Arts in Child Study and Education program at Osstf, she is currently a long-term occasional teacher with the Toronto District School Board. Her focus has been creating workshops for children, parents, and organizations that require an advocate who is familiar with education and family systems in Ontario. Her goal is to support these groups as they navigate through individual, institutional, and structural barriers that are in great need of change. She's the owner and executive director of Wondrous Educational Workshops, a not-for-profit organization dedicated to improving lives one workshop at a time. Her latest initiatives have focused on anti-Black racism in early childhood education. In her role as a board member with the Association of Early Childhood Educators of Ontario, she has been instrumental in creating a safe space for Black ECEs. The community of Black early childhood educators is a community of practice responsible for hosting one of the first webinars to address anti-Black racism in early childhood education with Black ECE scholars as panelists. Nicole is the 2020 recipient of the Early Childhood Studies Community Impact Award from the University of Guelph. The award was granted for her professional practice with children and families as it led to positive outcomes for the community. She has authored children's stories for a local organization, the Reading Partnership, and has contributed to the University of Toronto's Critical Studies in Equity and Solidarity undergraduate journal. Most importantly, she loves her family, candy, and activities that are fun and funny. I told you these are people who wear multiple hats and are just, have so many calls on their time and are so engaged. So we are here today to discuss advocating for each child to ensure the best possible learning environments for them. Sometimes parents feel that teachers and other education staff have the power to create change in school board and government policies, but that is not always the case. School boards and governments each have their priorities, and educators are not always present at the tables where policies and practices are discussed and implemented. That's why parent and community organizations, like the organizations our panelists represent, and teacher and education worker unions like Osstf FEESO, are always lobbying and engaging with school boards and governments to improve learning conditions, to ensure that all students receive the programs, supports, and services they need to be successful. So we're going to begin with a series of questions. Maybe for the first one, if I can, I'll turn to the panelists in the order in which I introduced you, and then we'll figure out what we're going to do for the second question and so forth. But I'll start with the first question. And if you could please just, I'll start with Laura. Could you tell us about some of the advocacy that you have been working on just prior to and during the pandemic? Mm-hmm. How has this advocacy helped Ontario parents and their children during this difficult and unprecedented period in Ontario? Laura.
Well, thanks very much, Harvey. I'll have to say that trying to think back to what we were doing pre-pandemic, it feels like a lifetime ago. We did a lot of rallies and large-scale protests at Queen's Park, but like a lot of organizations, we had to pivot when the pandemic hit and try some different strategies. And so for a while, a lot of that just looked like focusing internally and trying to figure out what kind of recommendations we could make to the government about what would work best for students with autism. But really, in the last few months, we've turned to alternative forms of advocacy that don't require physical presence of large groups together in one space. And we've also tried to increase the fun factor a little bit. So as your viewers may know, it's Autism Awareness Month. We've turned that into Autism Action Month because we think awareness is nice, but action is better. And so one of the things that we've done every Thursday this month, and we may just keep going indefinitely because it's too much fun. One of our members built one of those big carnival style rotary wheels. I call it the spinny wheel. And one person spins it and it lands on a number. And there's a bunch of envelopes with conservative MPP names in those envelopes. And we call it the Wheel of Misfortune. And whoever's name gets drawn, we direct all of our members to phone their constituency office the next day and ask them to use their powers as an MPP to influence the minister responsible for the autism program to do better for our kids. So that's one thing we do that's a ton of fun. At sort of system level advocacy, we continue to meet regularly with officials at the Ministry of Children, Community and Social Services and Education. I don't know whether my fellow advocates have the same experience, but I find that right now it's almost impossible to get anywhere near political staff. We're only able to get to senior civil servants. So we've been doing that. We've been working with opposition MPPs, trying to get questions in about our issue. We're also getting some surveys out into the field to sort of collect some data and find out from our members what the experience has been like for them and their children with autism, pivoting back and forth between in-person and online. And I mean, for a lot of our kids, online simply doesn't work at all. We just finished a fundraiser. We're going to, we raised a lot of money. We're going to take out a billboard in a riding yet to be named that will target a particular minister yet to be named. And then the usual, Twitter storms. We're looking at applying for third-party status going into the next election, which will give us the ability to express ourselves. And then on the more sort of local level or individual level, we continue to do small group advocacy training sessions. So like I can go out and do workshops on, how to advocate for your child just at the school level and sort of going up the chain of command if you're having difficulty there. So those are some of the things we've been up to. The Wheel of Misfortune is my personal favorite at the moment.
Thanks, Laura. I was going to say, if people walk away from here remembering one thing, they will remember the Wheel of Misfortune.
Well, let's see what the others have to say.
There will be more things to remember, but that will be one thing that will stick in people's minds, I'm sure. Theresa, I'm going to turn to you next and ask you if you can tell us about some of your advocacy and how it's helped parents and children during this difficult time.
So we, at Parents Engaged in Education, we pivoted our work immediately upon schools closing to serve at-risk youth, largely in the Scarborough area to start with. And we opened Canada's first education bank. The education bank allows low-income families to come in and their kids can pick supplies that they need for school, activities they need for fun, and amenities they need for self-care. So we have been constantly pushing the government to do more for low-income families, because they seem to think that just sending $200 or $400 to a family solves the problem. And we're constantly telling them, no, that is going to feed their families. These are families who line up at food banks every day to be able to eat. So if they get $400 from the government, you can believe they're going to take the time to go to No Frills or Freshly or somewhere like that and buy groceries for their family. They aren't going to buy school supplies or other things. And the other thing we're doing at the Education Bank is we're empowering the kids. So we have formed the Education Bank Kids Club to make using the Education Bank a positive thing for their family because it brings opportunity, not something where they have to feel like, well, I can only come here because I can't afford to support my child. No, I'm coming here for all the opportunities this is going to offer my child. So we're having STEM camp summer, reading, attaching literacy. We're doing a partnership with Indigo for diversity reads. So it'll be a diversity book club operating throughout the summer for the kids who are part of our group. There's going to be a Mother's Day essay contest, Mother's Caregiver Role Model Day essay contest, and the same with the Father Caregiver Role Model Day. Our kids get forgotten when we assign one label to a day. They are living in different circumstances than often the most of the rest of us. And so we want to be sure that their special person gets recognition. And we've partnered with a couple of companies to bring them great gifts they can give their mom or dad or role model or caregiver, whoever's that special person in their life, by writing an essay about it. We're doing a coloring contest right now, and the prize is a brand new computer. So we're trying to find ways that it's not just about coming to the Education Bank because you need a binder, you need a workbook, you need, whatever it is. We give them fun stuff. We're on a mission right now to get outdoor equipment. So we get our kids out when they're done at the end of the day being on screen. We want them out with skipping ropes, sports balls, making their own hopscotches, stuff like that. So we're sending all that information out. But what's really important here is that the kids are going to feel like a community. They will build their own community of people that can empower them. And so many, we're offering a speed mentorship program for high school students with HP in May and June. We have to give these kids a boost. That's what we want to do. At the Education Bank, we don't hand down to them, we raise them up. And that's what we need to all be thinking about here. And we are literally at the begging point with the government. We have no funding. We're a wholly volunteer organization. And we've developed this bank and we're running it with volunteers, but to keep it alive, we need base funding. And so far, every level of government has ignored our pleas to help keep the lights on. So we continue to advocate for these kids because while we always knew food banks filled their bodies and we had a reason and need for food banks, we ignored the growing gap that was happening in their learning and mental health. And that's why the Education Bank was designed and why we advocate for them every day.
Thanks, Theresa, for that perspective and the passion that went along with it. Shameela, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thank you, Harvey. So our group is fairly new. I mean, I've been at this for a while as a parent, and certainly when my kids were in elementary school, when all of them were in elementary school, I started out by just forming alliances in terms of just chatting with teachers and education workers, and I think that that's been kind of, for me, that's been the biggest piece in all this, is just making sure that I've been able to work with other stakeholders. So the teachers in my kids' lives were always really important. And so that's one of the messages that I'm constantly trying to get across to friends and other parents is we're all in this together, we're working together. And I think that that's kind of been the key with a lot of that's kind of been the key with our initiatives. Always just keeping in mind that we can work collaboratively together. So when we launched our group, it's only been about 2 years for Your Communities for Public Education, and we came together as a coalition of a lot of people from different areas. So there are parents and educators, some union folks, and then just general advocates from the community. And the main piece that I think really stands out for us is that we have a lot of students. So we have quite a few grade 12 students, and we're now bringing in some students from other grades in high school as well. And we're working together. Our biggest focus, prior to the pandemic was definitely around the cuts to education and fighting that with everything we had in us. So same thing like everybody else, attending the rallies, joining the picket lines at schools and outside MPP's offices. A lot of what we did is just awareness, right? So just saying, this is what's going to happen. If this gets cut, this is what happens, right? Because what we found at the grassroots level is that a lot of the parents, they knew the slogan, cuts to education, but they didn't really know what it meant. So same thing with the online education, they would just say, oh, it's not a big deal if my kid has to take 1 or 2 online courses. So our job was, we felt, to take it on and say, well, this is what it actually means for your kids. So a lot of our work has been around awareness and information sharing, specifically for York Region, what it would mean within our school boards here, but also looking at the province and what it means generally for students and for our education workers. So we launched 2 years ago. We had tailgate parties. We had rallies. We had a huge launch party. And then we had to pivot, obviously, when the pandemic hit. One of the things that we are really proud of is our solidarity camps. So on all of the strike days, we rented a space here in Newmarket and held solidarity camps to show our support for all of our education workers. And it was great. We had people from all over. We had high school students helping out when they could. We had lots of parent volunteers pulling together, and just generally lots of people from the community just coming in and helping. And it was a great opportunity for us to share, again, the awareness piece and the information within our communities for what's actually happening and what it all meant for our schools. And then throughout, we've just continued with a Facebook group. So we've been really kind of pushing a lot of our ideas and initiatives and the information sharing through social media and through media appearances, like everybody on this panel. I think just kind of trying to, any chance we get to share, our thoughts on things, we made sure we're there. Created our Safe Learner No Return hashtag, and I think that really helped us to kind of put it almost like an ultimatum, like, our kids don't want to return to school. Our families don't want our kids in school if they don't feel safe. If our educators aren't feeling safe, that we don't want to return under those circumstances. So it was a real push for us to just keep the focus in mind at all times. I think the other thing we're really proud of is our roundtable discussions, much like the one we're in right now, but we kind of pulled together people from different areas. So we had teachers, we had a biostatistician, Mart Stiles attended one of them, and just kind of bringing all the groups together. And again, a lot of it is for information for families. So what does everything mean for our kids in schools and for our education workers? Dispelling a lot of the myths was always kind of high on our priority. And then just more recently, what we're working on is, again, like everybody, letters to MPPs, to mayors of our communities, school board senior staff, and having very specific meetings through delegations, especially, and other meetings with senior board staff and trustees around issues, the usual school safety, funding, anti-Black racism. The renaming of a school here in York Region was a big piece for us this year. We were quite involved with that. And just doing anything we can to delegate anytime we can, and getting our youth involved. That's been a really big piece for us. So right now our youth are working on mental health kits for other high school students. So they've really done this all themselves, just with a little bit of guidance from some of the adults in the group, but just working on first surveying the group and then figuring out what can we provide, where are the gaps in mental health needs, for like where are school boards not doing it, and then trying to fill those gaps and just providing resources for a lot of the high school students. So that's our big push, is mental health. And then obviously now virtual learning and the hybrid model, which is a huge concern for us. We're just, again, I find from social media, just from the Facebook group that I run for York Region families, that there's just a lot of misinformation around what, because now parents are much more in tune with what it means to have virtual learning, but they don't necessarily know what virtual learning will look like when it's mandatory or when it's only virtual learning, and all the different things that means in terms of funding and our special education students and really our most vulnerable populations that are going to be impacted. So that's our big thing, just awareness and information sharing. Thank you.
Thanks, Shameela. I know that neither I nor my members will soon forget the solidarity that you and your group showed during those difficult times. And one can feel alone when you're facing a juggernaut like a government coming at you. But clearly we are not alone. We are working together, and that's we can take a great deal of heart from that, I think. Nicole, if you said, I'm going to turn it over to you.
All right, thanks everyone. So much information. Oh my goodness, I'm learning myself. So for me, pre-pandemic, I am on the board of Association of Early Childhood Educators of Ontario. And so for us, advocating for early childhood educators in childcare, in full day kindergarten, in family programs is important, obviously, because, if we don't have educators who feel like they're in the best situation, like with decent work, great wages, we know that can sometimes trickle over into our work, right? So we know that advocating for our ECEs and our early childhood educators in childcare is important for our families. So that's some of the work that we've been working on with the AECO. And then when we got into the pandemic, that's when everything happened, where we realized the need for some work with anti-Black racism in early childhood education. There had been no talk about it. We've got the College of ECEs who their policy we need to work on, and that's one of our big, fights right now. What we're advocating for is a change in their policy in terms of, what's going to happen with regards to anti-Black racism for early childhood education. We're working on, families feeling better about coming into childcare, understanding and knowing that there are policies in place in childcare. We've got a lot of organizations who, still are not acknowledging some of the things that are happening. So that's one of the biggest pieces right now in terms of advocacy for, community of Black ECEs. We've been fortunate enough, like we mentioned in the introduction, that we had a webinar for anti-Black racism, and it was actually, a challenge to find Black scholarly ECEs. And, this made us realize that, if we really want to start getting to our young people, we need to start encouraging them to get into this field, because we need great early childhood educators, right? We all understand and know that this is a field where we make a huge difference in the development of our young people. And we know also that when we advocate for ECEs, you're advocating for children and families, because when they're at their optimal, then the children at their optimal. When children are doing well, then families feel well as well, right? It's that whole idea of, my son or daughter, my child's going to this center. I love that they're there. They're doing the best. The quality care is, it's evident. It's something that we know that parents need to feel. So, I think in that sense, when we think about that, when I think about the advocacy piece from the my early childhood education piece, that's where I'm at. In terms of my hat that I wear for Wondrous Educational Workshops, so some of the workshops that I've been working on is helping families get through this pandemic through fun. I think so much has been happening that a lot of our families have been forgetting, with so much going on, it's okay to take a moment to just breathe and have fun with your child. And I'm finding that, through this workshop, parents are actually acknowledging and realizing, what, it's true. Like, what, I'm so caught up with everything that's been happening on the news, things that are happening with my child, they're home. And, I got to pay the bills. We got to do this. We got to do that. Even before we started this panel, we talked about the fact that, we're on 24/7, like it's constant. So, trying to get parents to understand that it's okay to take a moment and, 5 minutes to have fun with your child. You know what I mean? Put on a video. If they're into video games, play a video game with them. You know what I mean? If they love drawing, draw with them. I know sometimes we get caught up with, well, I got to cook, I got to clean, I got to do this, but take a moment. And we know that within that, it makes such a huge difference for the child. And that's all we want, right? Is that the development of a child is so important to where they end up being later on as adults, that these are the small moments that are going to make a difference for our young people. So I think that's some of the things that I think are helping our parents and our families when I think about advocacy in terms of what we're doing.
Thanks, Nicole. Such a great perspective. A serious issue, but it doesn't have to be treated with only seriousness at all times. It needs to be treated with fun sometimes too. And I am reminded, former Premier William Davis, who used to say, when you get education right, everything else follows. Well, maybe that's especially true when you get early childhood education right.
Right.
Important things follow from that. Thank you all. We're going to move on to our next question. Maybe I'll just jump down the Q1 and we'll start with Shameela. No, I'm going to try to follow the order I was in. I'm going to go to Theresa and then we'll just follow through the queue in that fashion. So our second question is, what recommendations do you have for parents who may be new to advocating for their children with the school board or with the government? What tips could you provide them, and how can parents get involved in advocacy roles in their community? So I'll ask if we can start off with Theresa.
So I would start off with how parents can advocate for their child in the school system. And the one thing that I say to parents when we talk about this is, go in as a partner for a solution. Go in with a smile first, greet whoever you're dealing with in a positive manner, and you will get a smile back. And then you can start true advocacy. When you walk in yelling and you're walking in defensive and responsive, you are already behind the 8 ball in trying to make a difference. For my own child, when I get called in about something he did, I always walked in with the kind of in the back of my mind going, I'm sure he probably did do that. You know what? This cracks with home. So let me start with the fact I'm halfway there. Okay. But that, even knowing that, we need a solution to the best result for my child. But approaching it that way with anyone that I had to advocate, whether it was a trustee, school board, principal, teacher, was to say, okay, let's start at a level playing field, because some of this could be true, but not all of it's true. And we need to be partners on a solution that creates success. So that's kind of my way of helping parents. And you know what, if you go in that way too, you're a little more relaxed when you start the conversation. You're already open to a discussion versus telling them what has to be done and them telling you yes or no, they're going to do it. And I also encourage parents to understand that you have to advocate for your child for the rest of their life. That's what a parent does. Right? Our role doesn't end in grade 8 because we think our kids, okay, they're in high school, they're okay. I always said to parents, high school is where you start the advocacy in a big way. They're making life decisions that will affect them the rest of their lives. And I call on teachers too to understand that sometimes parents are a little bit, maybe demanding or whatever. But at the end of the day, I believe every parent starts out just wanting the best for their child. Right. And if we can all be on that platform before we start talking about an issue, I think we get so much further. And for parents to think, at the end of the day, teachers want what's best for your child. Maybe it's not happening that week. maybe, but to have an understanding, it could be a lot of things that you don't know about that has led to a reaction. And then if you can deal with that just with some level of understanding, like, especially right now during COVID, starting a conversation with, yes, this world sucks for all of us right now. So I understand you might have yelled at my child and you probably didn't mean it. But here's what happened at home following that. So to give us all a broader perspective of what's going on with that child is how we can reach solutions for our kids. I also always tell parents, be willing to go up the chain of advocacy. If you start at the premier's office or the minister's office, they're going to kick you right back down to the teacher. Start with the teacher. Statistics tell us 75% to 85% of issues are resolved at the teacher level. Then the principal, then the superintendent, and then maybe your trustee, director of ed, etc. But if you just go to the top first and you're very in a negative frame mind, people will take you less seriously. Sometimes people think, well, if I yell loud enough, they're going to take me really seriously. And that's not what happens. You yell loud enough and this is what happens. We don't see you, we don't hear you, you're just yelling. So if we can encourage parents to take a breath and educators to take a breath going into that advocacy meeting, I think the results for all around will be so much better. That's sort of how I approach my advocacy work.
Thank you, Theresa. I don't know if as the moderator here, I'm supposed to be neutral, but let me just wholeheartedly endorse as a former classroom educator, what you just said. It's so true. So many problems can be solved through that approach and may not need to go anywhere up the chain at all when you have those conversations. So thank you for that. I'm going to go to Shameela.
Thank you. I agree with everything Theresa said. Obviously, I think that there's a lot of wisdom in those words. And I would say the same thing. Always start with the teacher. And the other piece that I've really learned in the last couple of years, particularly around our advocacy and writing letters and email messages, and I think we're all doing that a lot these days, whether it's with school boards or our MPPs or trustees, whomever. I like the idea of staying positive first. So always, like with anything, if you start with a positive comment first and kind of show a willingness to listen and learn, I find that goes a long way. Massaging egos has also really helped recently. So when we start with, we've learned now as well, just, as much as we may not want to do it, I think it's important to kind of acknowledge the work that has been done already. Because I think when we just go in and, especially I remember, last August when a lot of us were just, so upset with with decisions that were being made at a government level and at a school board level. And we thought we felt completely out of control as parents. Like we had no say in anything, and things were changing from day to day. I know the education workers felt the same way. And it was really easy to just be angry all the time. But I think what we learned really quickly was when we talked to the trustees or school board people, we would just say, always thank them for everything that they've been doing. Because I know that they worked really hard with very little resources and guidance and funding. So that was important. And I think we've gotten better about doing that. It's just making sure that we massage the egos, acknowledge all the good work that has been done, and then launch in and start making suggestions for ways. And kind of as a parent, I know it's really easy for us to say, oh, well, they should be doing, A, B, and C and get to it right now. Like that should have been done last year. And I think just over time as an advocate, I think you really learn everything always takes much longer than you think it's going to. With our school boards in particular, sometimes I feel like the level of inefficiency is so frustrating. But there's a method, there's a process. You have to kind of just learn to trust the process and stay calm through it all. And then just remember to try to always find something positive to say before launching into suggestions.
Thanks, Shameela. Great advice. Nicole, your recommendations for parents.
Yeah, I think for me, when I think about the advocacy piece for parents, one of the things I always think about on top of everything that Shameela and Theresa have already said is understanding your own ideas of advocacy. I think a lot of times when we tell parents, okay, this is how you advocate, or we make these ideas and suggestions, it's almost having parents step back and think and say, okay, well, how do you advocate for yourself? Because when you think about how you advocate for yourself, then you can start working on how you're going to advocate for your child, right? Because, when you think about being in the workplace, for example, are you the type of person that's going to make the phone call if something happened? Are you the type of person who's writing the letters, writing the emails? Are you the person who's just going to just not say anything, just kind of be like, you know what? I'm just going to hold my tongue, and then wait, make it fester up and then explode, right? It's understanding how you advocate for yourself in order for you to be able to advocate for your child, because those same skills and qualifications that you use for yourself is what you're going to be using. Like Shameela and Theresa said, going in with a smile, knowing that, okay, maybe it wasn't their intent, so I'm just going to take my time, right? Find out the situation, ask questions first, and blaze after. I mean, we know that we can't do it that way, but that's kind of the thought process, right? Is understanding that we need to be logical, right? So for me, when I share information about advocacy for parents, I always let them know. I always kind of ask them, so what do you do when something happens to you? How do you advocate for yourself? And then once I start that conversation, that's when they start to realize, oh, okay, well, you know what? You're right, now that I think about it. And then once they're able to understand that, I just say, you know what? The same thing that you have to do for yourself, it's what you have to do for your child. The other piece I always say too is on top of, adding to Shameela and Theresa, is also staying connected by even volunteering, volunteering your time and your resources. A lot of time, especially now being online, we're feeling like, oh, well, how can I do that? The same way that you take vacation days is the same way that you can volunteer online. Maybe you could read a book, you could read a story, whichever way you're able to contribute to your child's classroom. It's a good way to advocate, right? Just being there helps out. The last thing I'd like to say, in particular for me now that I've been talking to Black parents, is, sometimes talking to the educator to say, what are your thought process? What's your thought process on cultural relevant pedagogy? And even if you don't want to use the terminology, because sometimes you don't want to come across as a know-it-all, right? You just want to know that, my child's coming from where they're coming from. What is it that you can offer for my child to feel comfortable? Like, how is my child going to be welcomed? And this is not, it's not a hit at the educator's program. It's just an honest question, trying to, and it's your approach, right? If you're not going in with this whole wagging the finger, are you going to be doing? You go in simply asking, like, what do you do for this? What do you do for that? Just make a casual conversation. Those are ways that you can advocate and keep the doors open with your educator, with the whole school environment too, right? With volunteering. And then we know that there's power in numbers. So we also talk to our parents about rallying together. Like if there is a sincere issue that you're feeling, getting everyone together to say, how are you feeling? Is it just me? Am I being too sensitive? Because sometimes you need to hear from other people. Sometimes you just have to find out, okay, am I just being a little bit too over the top right now? Or is this something that other parents are seeing and other parents are thinking about, right? So having those conversations with other parents as well, I think helps when you think about the advocacy piece. And then, I think all of that would help in terms of helping parents to get through this, what we're going through right now.
Nice.
Thanks. That is great and practical advice. And see how you put that into practice. Laura.
Well, first I have to apologize for the cats in the background. It's feeding time at the zoo. But hey, everybody's online learning experience is like the best part is the animals. So I have to agree with all of my my fellow panelists, certainly about things like, being civil, being, building relationships, respecting the chain of command, all of those things. I have to say that for me as a teacher, and as an educator, it was a very weird experience for me the first time I had to walk into rooms full of educators and wear my parent hat only. Um, I also have to say that the way I was treated changed instantly once I self identified as a teacher. Um, and so while I do want to echo everything that was said about, like, look, it's all about relationships. And if you can work things out with the individual teacher, that's absolutely the way to go. You should always bring coffee, like just always when you go into the like coffee and Timbits. I've had teachers like start to tear up. They're so happy because they're so overworked and they're so exhausted. Um, there are other things that you can bring as well. um, I also really recommend, if it's more than just a meeting with a parent, if you're meeting with a team of people at the school, that it's a really smart idea to bring somebody with you. Bring your partner, and if you can't, bring a friend or an advocate, somebody who can take notes for you, because oftentimes things are happening too quickly for you to completely recall everything that was said. So do we have time for a short story time? Because I want to tell a story that embarrasses me a little bit, but proves a point. So for your viewers that know what it's like trying to fight for autism services in this province, you know it's a battle. By the time our son was 5, we had already been engaged in 2.5 years of really, really heavy duty advocacy. And I want to give a shout out to ECEs here for a second, because it was an ECE that first noticed that something was different about our son. Um, and then we got into advocacy and we did a whole bunch of things. Fast forward about a year, and the kids in the daycare are being moved up to the preschool room one at a time. And I noticed them all moving, right? Because their cubbies go over to the other side. Except my son isn't being moved up. Well, I'm in fight or flight mode, right? I'm sure that this is because he's autistic. He's being discriminated against. I pick up my phone. I get ready to call that director, and I'm like, I want to know why my son isn't being moved up, right? And she pauses me and says, Mrs. McIntosh, we move them up when it's their birthday. Your son's birthday isn't until February. And I was like, oh, whoops. Um, hmm. Okay. Thanks so much for that. Hope I didn't just blow the entire relationship we built for the last 2 years. But I think one of the things that I want to acknowledge for people who are experiencing real systemic problems, if you're talking about discrimination against students with disabilities or discrimination against students based on race, sometimes, like, as much as we're sitting here saying stay calm, sometimes it's really hard to stay calm. You want to go in screaming, and maybe we're asking people to conform to sort of a white privilege system where we all sit around and behave nicely, and like sometimes emotions happen. So if it does go above the teacher level, here's some recommendations that I have, and some others touched on this. Number one, connect with others and just sort of check yourself and see, like, am I being unreasonable? Like, if I had called any other mother at the daycare, I would have figured it out. But no, I had to go off. So don't do that. The other thing I want to acknowledge is that sometimes, even without being conscious of it, us teachers can be very intimidating. And we sit there with our binders and our notepads and we take notes. And one of the tactics that I've learned is to mirror that behavior. So show up with a binder, even if all you've got in it is, like, shopping coupons, whatever. Show up with a binder, take notes. I mean, I would actually suggest that you fill the binder with things like, oh, I don't know, the school's policies, the school board policies, a copy of the Human Rights Act never hurts. Maybe some policy and what are they called? PPMs, Harvey? What are they called? Policy and procedure manual or something, memorandums. That's the other thing is, oh God, the acronyms in this system. Um, and then another tactic that I've used quite successfully is I bring my kid. I can't get daycare all the time. And so if you want to sit here and tell me that, my son doesn't need the accommodation that I'm asking for, but he's in the room literally like climbing the wall and swinging off the blinds, then it's kind of hard to ignore. So, I mean, obviously only do that if you can keep your kid safe and happy. But I think the important thing is to keep the focus on your child. Often principals will try to say things like, well, we have other kids with special needs in the school, or there's all these other kids. We can't afford what your kid needs. And you have to approach it from a relentless, stubborn point of view of, okay, but I'm not a parent of any other kid at this school. I'm a parent of this kid, and I'm here to advocate for this kid. And all of the other stuff, the timetabling and the budgeting, that's your job. My job here is to advocate for my kids. And you say it politely but firmly. Um, and yeah, just remember to bring the coffee. Just always bring the coffee. So much coffee.
I'll second the vote for coffee. Thanks, Laura. Yeah, policy and program memoranda. Those are the kinds of things that the ministry deals in, whereas parents need to deal with what's good for their children. And they're not always overlapping. I'm going to turn to the third question. It's a bit of a lengthy one, obviously. Comes with its own perspective, but let me set this up and ask Shameela to answer first. The Doug Ford government was elected in 2019. They've cut social supports like the rollback of the proposed $15 minimum wage, guaranteed income pilot program. They canceled rent control in new buildings. And these are the kinds of things that hurt families. This government also cut thousands of educators, which had a lot of impact, but includes things like reduction in courses available to students and other kinds of supports. Cut writing programs for Indigenous curriculum, canceled over $100 million earmarked for repairs for schools. At a time when public education should be a priority, Doug Ford's new budget proposes over $1 billion in cuts to education, further eroding our world-class education system and further reducing programs and supports for your children. How do you think this will affect students during the remainder of the pandemic and beyond? And in particular, how will this affect Black, racialized, and Indigenous students, as well as students who may need extra supports? Shameela.
Oh, I'm so happy to be going first for this one, Harvey. Thank you. You know what? I think it's really tough to stay positive, and I'm listening to that and just thinking, well, okay, how do we stay positive with it? How do we even find something good to say when we all know the reality is that we're kind of up the creek without paddles, right? Like we're all kind of fighting, and it feels like we're fighting and fighting and fighting all the time, and it's exhausting, right? And then you throw in a pandemic, and it's doubly exhausting. So, I mean, I think that the main thing is to not give up. Obviously, I think that every now and again, I need a little reminder from somebody at your communities. I'm going to give a little shout out to Vanessa, because I always think, oh, I just want to give up. Like I'm done. I can't do this anymore. And then that little voice that comes through a WhatsApp message or a text message. So I think just reminding all of us to kind of lean in to everybody else who's also doing this advocacy work. And I think just reminding one another that it is worth it. So I think that sometimes we think, oh, I can't write another letter. I can't make another phone call. I'm done with the phone's apps and the things that you think are just not working. But the reality is that they are working, right? So even when we think, we're not making changes, we're not getting the funding we want, I think it's just important to remember that is probably one of the key ways to make change, is to make enough of a noise as a collective to force them to listen, force them to hear us. So not to give up with all that stuff, and then trying to find creative ways to reach out to others as well. So when it comes to parents, we're trying to say, look at other avenues for support. So where else can we lean in for support? Who else haven't we reached? And just, trying to figure out, okay, how do we get to our school councils? Let's say that, like, even just find like one other avenue to reach out to get support and awareness. I think that's the other thing, is just the more people we can make aware of what all of this actually means for our students and our educators, the more power that we have as a collective, right? So I think I can't really think of much else to say, because there isn't a ton to do at this point except continue to lean on each other, and just, I think, not be afraid of putting ourselves out there. So if you see an opportunity to work with another group or work with other advocates, somehow form little coalitions and just because we've actually been very successful with this. I think a lot of us, like we all, there's so many people where I know people as Facebook friends or Twitter friends. I've never actually met them in person, but it's like we share a brain sometimes, and we just think, oh, I'm going to pick on that. Like I'll send a little private message and say, hey, what do you think about this idea? Those are the kind of things that I think are going to get us through this, through the exhaustion and the anger and the frustration. Is just leaning on each other as much as possible.
Nice.
Thanks, Shameela. And I hope you and the other panelists and the folks you work with also take time to take care of yourselves to some extent in these difficult times. But I am so grateful for the fact that you've found the energy to write that one more letter and do that one more thing. And it does have an impact. And we saw that in negotiations. We saw that the community working together has an impact. And it doesn't work in a linear fashion, but change can happen, and it certainly won't happen with the kind of advocacy that you folks do. Nicole.
Yeah, when I was thinking about this question, like, I thought about it and I realized, the be all and end all is it's going to have a negative impact. Like that's just the bottom line. Like, I mean, there's nothing else to say other than it's going to be negative. When I think about the ripple effects, I mean, for me, I'm that person that goes, oh, well, then if this happens, this is going to happen. So you know what? Now it's all going to collide, right? So this whole issue of, so minimum wage means, okay, less money in my household. Now I have food insecurities. Now there's no more food. My health is going to be affected. Like, do you know what I mean? Like, it just feels like it just goes this way versus, going like what you just said, Harvey, it's not linear, right? It's going to be affecting everyone everywhere. So, I mean, number one, that's one thing. And then the other piece for me in particular are the Black students. When I thought about this whole idea of courses being taken away, and this is personal for me because my daughter, when she was in high school, it was her last year, and they took away courses, and this was like about 3 or 4 years ago, and it was just changed within the school. They took away the course and she had nothing. So thankfully, as a parent who advocates for her child, I was able to go in and say, okay, well, what are the options, right? But for me, I thought to myself, what about all the other students whose parents are not able to advocate for them? They just took their child's word for it when their child came home and said, Mom, there's no more courses, so I can't go to school. And then what happens there? Here it is. Now they're not going to school. Where are they going? What are they doing? Who are they doing it with? And if they don't have the courses, they don't get to graduate with their friends. That's another issue for their self-esteem. Now there's mental health issues happening with our young people. Then they don't get to graduate. Where are they going to go? They feel like, okay, well, forget it. If I'm not going to graduate, I don't want to go to school then. Forget it. They already feel like they're not welcomed in the school because of who they are, because of the color of their skin. So now it just feels like an added, pressure on top of everything else, right? So, for me, like I said, it's just a negative impact. Hopefully, the positive side, like Shameela was saying, is trying to see the positive side at this point, is helping to teach our young people that this is why we need to advocate. And this is why you have to go about, against the grain. So here it is. Maybe the school may not have the course for you right now, but it's okay. You could take it next semester. Maybe you could take it at night school. Maybe you could take it in the summer. Don't worry. Don't let this stop you, right? And we need guidance counselors and we need caring adults who are going to be able to share that information with our young people. And that's where advocacy comes in, for real, because if we're not sharing that information with our parents who are sharing it with their young people, they feel like they're stuck. They don't know where else to go. And without these courses, some of these students are not getting into college and university, which we know already for Black and racialized students, that's already an issue. So like I said, it's just this idea that once we do one thing, it just impacts so many other things. And when the government doesn't see that, it almost feels like, do you have family? Like, are you all blinded to, what else is so what's going on? Like, so yes. And I think I think it was Laura that was mentioning that idea of, when you try to go in without, being angry, it's hard. It's hard. Like you're really trying to be reserved. you're trying to do Theresa's work of going in with a smile. You're trying, but it's like, right? So it really is something that when we think about it, in order for us to get where we have to get to is to advocate. Letters, emails, pickets, whatever it is, we got to do it. So that's where I am with that.
Thanks, Nicole. And it's such a great reminder of how the advocacy is going to need to continue post-pandemic, because all these gaps that have been exacerbated during the pandemic, that it's going to take extra resources to close them. The project is clearly laid out in front of us. Laura.
I identify so much with what Nicole was just saying of how hard it is to stay calm when you're advocating in these times, and to stay motivated too. I mean, when I first looked at this question of like, in the face of all of these cuts, how are we going to keep doing what we're doing? And I was joking before we went live, I'm not sure how to answer this without swearing, because there are times that it feels like, how are we supposed to survive another year with this government? And with all of the chaos that it has unleashed, and all of the impacts that it's had on the most marginalized communities in our province. I mean, yeah, my advocacy focuses specifically on autism, but intersectionality matters. And we've got kids in our school that are experiencing discrimination because of their gender identity, because of their disability, because of their race, and often multiple things there. And so the cuts that have been coming down through the education system are hurting those communities the most. Don't even get me started about vaccination in the communities that need it most. But one thing that I know is that when cuts come to education, it's often the special ed students that feel it first. Because I assure you, if the government says tomorrow we need to cut $1 billion from the education system, there's no 180,000 director at the Board of Education that's going to lose their job. It's going to be an EA. It's going to be a special education support staffer. It's going to be somebody that has no seniority. And the problem with that, as it impacts the community that I try to advocate for, is that those are the ones that are least able to handle the change and the transition. I mean, kids with autism generally don't like transitions. So to lose an EA that they've worked really well with for a year or more is devastating. And I think when we look at where we're going to be post-pandemic, there's always a gap between mainstream students and those with exceptionalities. I think we're going to see that gap has widened, and then the supports that we need to fix that are going to be gone. And I'm terrified at the implications of that. I think the only way to stay motivated in the face of all of this awfulness is to focus on the small victories, especially with your individual child. I also feel like public support for education has really increased in the last year. I think there's a lot of parents who have a newfound respect for how difficult it is to be an educator or an education worker. And so I feel like solidarity has never mattered more than it does right now, and opportunities like this to come together and talk with other groups and to amplify each other. I want to amplify the voices of those that are fighting anti-Black racism out here in Peel. I want to amplify the voices of my friends in my own home town of York Region. I want to amplify student voices in all of that, in all of this. And I think the only thing that's going to keep me sane is a countdown clock to the next election. And if we can stay focused on defeating this government and electing somebody who actually cares about education and is prepared to invest in it rather than make cuts, I think I can fight it out for another year in the hopes that will happen.
Thanks, Laura. I'm going to turn to Theresa.
I have 2 points to make about the government. One, I would like the government to stop dishing our teachers and ignoring our teachers who are there helping our kids get through the most difficult time in their lives. They need to realize that when they don't respect teachers, how do we get parents and kids to respect teachers? They're not in the limelight being thanked like the essential workers at hospitals and grocery stores. You know, teachers aren't getting the same recognition as someone working at Food Basics as an essential worker. And it's time that we all advocate for that recognition. It astounds me that the partners missing at the table when it comes to deciding the future of education and how education is going to be managed in COVID are teachers. And they are the ones dealing with this every day with our children and our parents. So that makes me angry. And that I would like to change. And we have to all advocate for that. The second thing is I would really love Stephen Lecce and Rob Ford to come into the education bank and meet a family where the mom doesn't read or write. And she's got 4 children at home learning virtually. The equipment she's been given by the board works or doesn't work. So we've got her reliable equipment. But at the end of the day, she's relying on the teachers and her children. And I can tell you by meeting the children, they're overwhelmed as a family. So she can't even write her own name, let alone help and support those children. So these are the families I want Lecce and Ford to meet and to tell me that they're doing all they can. Because they just don't understand what our low-income families are facing. And, you know, points were made about parents going in and advocating and all that, and that some don't. You know, a vast majority of the families coming to the education bank do not, one, know how, nor have the confidence or maybe the language skills to properly understand the system and to properly advocate within the system. So we're creating another gap for our low income and racialized families. And I would really like to see them address that. So that's our fight right now. And we're going to keep it up.
Thanks, Theresa. I hesitate to wish upon you a meeting with Stephen Lecce, but but you raise it's such a worthwhile point that I'm going to support you in that. I'm going to go to another question here. And I'll begin with Nicole. If there's one thing that you wanted parents to know about advocating for their children in school boards and government to ensure that their children receive an inclusive and comprehensive education with the supports they need to succeed, what would that be?
I think, you know, Theresa said it before, and I actually had thought about when she said it, I was like, Theresa, you said what I was going to say, but it's okay. But it's true. Advocating is a full-time responsibility. You know, it doesn't stop when your child seems independent of you. I think a lot of parents feel like, oh, well, they're in high school, it's okay. One of the things that I heard Theresa say recently when she talked about this idea of a lot of parents not knowing how to advocate, it's true. We've got English language learners, we've got families who are newcomers, we've got racialized families who are just feeling like, you know, like Laura said, intimidated by teachers, right? So when you think about this idea of how to encourage families who are, you know, in those groups, it's about having them join organizations like all of us here. That way we can advocate for one another, right? Because that's really the only way. Is if you're not feeling comfortable enough, we know that advocacy is sometimes behind the door. A lot of us here, we call ourselves advocates, but we're more activists than anything, right? Because we're actually putting ourselves on the line to kind of say things that a lot of people don't want to say. And that's okay, because that's what we need. We need people who are activists, people who are advocates. We work together, right? So me talking to parents, you know, suggesting to them, and also making it known to teachers, you know, because I think sometimes some teachers get into this idea of, and I'm guilty of it too, right? Where we're like, your kid's big enough to advocate for themselves, right? But sometimes we have to we have to understand that yes, they're old enough, but sometimes they don't have the skills, right? Think about us. Like we didn't just wake up advocates. We didn't just snap our fingers and become good at this, right? It was about reading, it was about researching, it was about networking, it was about, finding our voice in order for us to advocate for ourselves. So I think to just help our young people, it's, reminding them that, you can speak for yourself, but at the same time, as a parent, I'm here for you still, particularly in high school, even in college and university. I mean, like I said, my daughter now, she's in university, I'm in college. And one of the issues that I've found is that some of the things that she had gone through in high school obviously followed her to college. Some parents don't realize you can use your IEP in college, get whatever supports you need to help your child succeed in college and university. And it's okay for you to be there. The same way Laura talked about having someone come in if you have to speak to a group, why can't it be a parent? You know what? You don't have to necessarily introduce me as your parent. I could just be your advocacy police officer or whatever it is. But the point is that it's okay for us to be able to advocate for our children, regardless of where they are, high school, college, university. And I also talked about the fact that, some parents are fortunate enough that their children are able to advocate for themselves. Some parents have children who are advocating for them, right? We've got some newcomers, or we have some parents who are English language learners who have their young people who have grown up in Canada, who are the ones who are speaking for their parents, right? So that's another piece I think that would help, because now the parent and the child are working together. And then just also reminding our young people that, affirmations, reminders of, strategies and ideas are all you need to advocate for yourself. So I think that would be it in terms of me sharing any more tips with our families and our young people about advocacy.
Thanks, Nicole. I'm going to go to Laura next.
Oh, well, thank you. That was great, Nicole. So awesome. So at the Ontario Autism Coalition, we have a motto, because we are entirely a volunteer-run organization. We don't have an office, we don't have staff. And the motto is simply this: do what you can when you can. And I think that really speaks to the need for parent and student advocates and activists to take time for self-care. You can't advocate when you're not healthy. And I feel like it bears repeating that if right now people are in survival mode and they feel like they're not doing enough to advocate for their kids or for others, um, we're living through a global pandemic. So if you didn't write that letter last week, you know what? Don't beat yourself up about it. Do it when you can. You'll get bursts of energy, and you'll have lows, and that's totally normal. The other thing too, that I would recommend is, like, find your team, find your fellow compatriots, whatever group it is that you're advocating for, but then also network outside that. Remember that there's always something to be learned by others. I would say don't reinvent the wheel. There's a ton of information out there about, well, I'm going to acronym drop here: the IPRC process, the IEP process, all of those things. Like, you don't necessarily have to start from the ground. There's resources already out there that you can get. And I guess that just goes to my next point, which is do your homework, right? Before you go to a meeting or before you're doing any direct advocacy, make sure that you do your homework. It's hard. I'm not going to lie. The advocacy road is a tough one. There's there's virtually no money in it. But you know what? It's totally worth it when you see the payoff in your kids. And I guess I would end with, take time to celebrate those small victories. I mean, really, like in our community, I remember once going to a speech where there was a room full of autism parents, and the head of the organization got up and she came to the microphone. She's like, just before I give my speech, I just want to say something that only people in this room will understand. But my son ate a carrot today. and the entire room exploded. And outside that room, I'm not sure people would get it. The thing is, like, a lot of kids with autism are food adverse and they don't like trying new things, but we all knew that was a big deal and it deserved a standing ovation. So you take the time to celebrate those things. And then, when you're doing advocacy, try to have fun. I mean, I've got a strong mischievous streak, as Harvey knows. And if there's a way to make it fun, then do it. Try to keep laughing, because laughing is way better than crying. That was dark. Sorry. I'm going to end it there.
I'll just take us back to the wheel of misfortune for a moment.
Exactly. Exactly.
We can recall that. Thanks, Laura. Theresa.
Yeah, just to pick up on Laura's point, I've done a couple of keynotes with school councils lately, and I said to them, you know what, take a moment and pat yourself on the back. You're still here. You're still fighting for your school communities, and try not to put too much expectation on yourself, because you set too many goals, and if you can't meet them, instead of being fulfilled by what you've done, you become discouraged by what you weren't able to accomplish. And so I tell them this is an unprecedented time, and we all have to give ourselves a pat on the back that we're coping with COVID, our families are coping with COVID, and we're still thinking about others. And so that's my message to school councils right now, is really just take a moment to pat yourself on the back, watch out for other members you see burning out, try to be there as an advocate and supporter. And also try not to focus right now on fundraising. I've never been a big fundraising advocate when it comes to school councils. The work is within the community. And right now we have 200,000 kids that we can't find in Ontario that are not going to school. So school council members, please focus. If your school's missing some kids, work with the principal, and maybe you can do some parent outreach to those families to see if you can help in any way. Are there resources you can bring to the family to get them back out into the system? But it's an educational crisis that 6% of our children are missing from the education system. So that's a way that school councils can do good work this year. I think fundraising always is a question of equity, and it continues to improve situation for affluent schools, and it continues to create a gap for our lower income schools and students. So that would be my first advice, is to really, like Laura said, give yourself a pat on the back so you can continue to move forward. And I think too that it's watching out, what can we do and what can we do differently? The old standard of an engaged parent is that a parent who comes to the events at school, buys stuff that's up for fundraising, does the spirit day, all of those things. That is not parent engagement. That is parents involved in the school. Okay. Parent engagement is telling your kid to have a great day. You believe in them. You're there if they have a problem. They can always talk to you. And at the end of the day, not just saying, how was school today? What did you learn today? Did you have fun today? What was your best part of the day that you learned? What teacher came on that you really liked? And make that conversation a fuller conversation about school, because that's where you hear little issues start to pop up, when a kid might say, no, everything went fine. And then, you're really talking to them and they go, you know what, everybody laughed at me when I did this, or I said this in the middle of the room. And, I felt really bad about it. That's what we need to be listening to right now. Our kids are in a mental health crisis. I'm very concerned kids are going to come out of these last year and a half, 2 years, and have PTSD about the effect that this pandemic has had on their lives. They're not learning to socialize. And we all know too that statistically, when we closed schools, we thought it was the affluent kids who stayed home and the lower income kids who went to school. And in fact, the reverse happened. Right. The affluent kids are going to school, and our vulnerable kids are staying home because of scares within their family about disease, multi-generational, whatever aspect has caused them to keep their children home. Then we're creating a bigger gap because oftentimes the parents may not be able to fulfill the role of an educator. So it's really, really important that, we look at supporting the system as a whole. We go find those vulnerable families and we go find those lost children and we get them back in the system and we get the advocacy going for the children who need support.
Thank you, Theresa. Shameela.
Thank you, Theresa. That was great. I think that kind of just leads right into my focus was really going to be about what we should be doing as school councils as well. So, the past year in particular, and I say the last 3 years with this government, have been confusing and definitely challenging for all of us. There's this kind of palpable unease in the air all the time, and there's a lot of mistrust, a lot of misinformation. So again, I think it's important for us as parents to look out for each other and support each other, talk to each other about what the needs are within our own families, but also within the communities. So I know at our school and our communities, as when we become aware of a family that has a specific need, we all pull together. And sometimes it's as simple as one post on Facebook to just say, hey, we have a family in this community that's struggling right now. What can we do to help out? And it's amazing how the village kind of pulls together. And so I know that certain areas of the province, or definitely within the GTA, it's a little bit easier to pull together sometimes. There are just fewer barriers around that. But I think the last year has really shown us that we can pull together, and we can definitely use social media as an anchor for all of us to find ways to find community. So definitely and I think that that's an important role for school councils, as Theresa said, because the focus really shouldn't be on fundraising, especially in pandemic schooling years. That was always my least favorite part of the fundraising piece. It's always been my least favorite part of school council. I think it's more important to engage parents, to bring about the awareness, joining up with other school councils. So that's something with Newmarket Parent Network, where every year, and it started with the Parent Reaching Out grants and just kind of working together to pool our funds together to have speakers so that you can get more for the whatever little money you get from the government. Pool it together, work with other communities, and it's amazing to me because even within one town, our school communities can be very different. So the needs at one school can be very different from the needs at another school. And when we're sitting around talking, whether it's virtually or back in the day when we could actually have meetings in person, we would say, across the board, generally, every school would always say mental health concerns always came out as like the top priority. So every year we'd make sure we have at least one talk about mental health. IPRC and IEP, again, as I think it was Laura who was saying, we throw out these acronyms, and the parents, even educated parents, sometimes we have no idea sometimes what they even mean, right? So, and I know I'm guilty of it too as a mental health professional. I'll just say, oh, well, in their IEP, there must be a list of accommodations and figuring out, and the parents just look at me like they have no idea what I'm saying. So I think it's just, again, it's important for us to work together with other communities, with other school communities, to see what the needs are. And then I find that if you can pool your resources together, it just spreads it a little bit further, and you can get help for more people. I think this year, one of the things, because we're meeting virtually with school councils, and then we have the students who are in schools, and then students who are learning virtually as well. And you want to try and include the families of those students who are learning virtually so that they still feel some attachment to their home schools. So I think that that's been a bit of a challenge this year, but we try to, with school councils, is really encouraging inclusivity and the making sure that there's a recognition that you're trying to include everybody. And inclusivity and diversity doesn't just mean making sure we include students who are at school and learning at home, but it means including all of the different people. So you include, people who identify as racialized, include everybody who identifies with all the different genders, and make sure that we're meeting those needs through engagement. So when we're setting up parent engagement events, we're thinking about all of those different communities. So looking at, if we made sure this year, like I said, mental health is always a concern, but we made sure that we had something about anti-Black racism this year and something about anti-Indigenous and anti-Asian racism. Those are things that we need to talk about. And as much as you get some school council members who are like, oh no, we don't need to talk about that, they're covering that in school, I think it's really important for us to remember that parents need that awareness piece so they can be having those conversations with their families at home. They need to be talking about these things at home. So we can't just expect our teachers to be covering all of these topics only at school, right? So I know my kids are learning way more about Indigenous language and Indigenous peoples than I ever did growing up in school. I don't remember learning anything, to be honest about it. And if I did, it's gone from my brain. So I feel really privileged and just really, it makes me really happy when we sit around the dinner table and they'll tell me things about residential schools or tell me things about something that they talked about while debating in classes about anti-Black racism, whatever it is. But we need to be more educated as parents and more engaged so that we can have those meaningful conversations at home. And hoping, again, and it's also just encouraging families to continue to do that kind of thing even, right? It's so easy now with everybody online and virtual all the time. It's so easy to be in our separate bedrooms or our separate spaces and just, kind of doom scrolling and going through on our phones all the time. But just reminding parents of the importance of engaging with one another and with our families should be key going forward. And I think that's one of the key ways that we can be stronger. If we have stronger families, we're going to have stronger communities. And that's how we can fight back to be stronger against this government and hopefully have stronger leadership as we all want. We want leaders who are going to value our educators, value our public education system, and value our healthcare system and how they all intersect to make us all better human beings.
Thanks, Shameela. We're going to put up links to your organization's websites up on the screen, I know, but I'm also going to give each of you sort of a minute or two to plug your organization, tell us what you need to tell us. Let us know how parents can get a hold of you, find out more about your different advocacy groups, get involved with projects that you're involved in. So I'm going to start off with Laura again and go for the plug.
Okay, sure. This feels like the setup at the TV interview show. So, what's your book called? So we are the Ontario Autism Coalition. We are a grassroots political advocacy group that fights for ethical, evidence-based services and supports for people with autism and their families. That's our mission statement. You can see there, I've got a linked tree link there, so you can see our website, our Twitter, our Facebook groups, and so on. Easiest way to get in touch with me is email. So it's laura.kirbymcintosh@gmail.com. Or if you need to, you can go through the link tree and find me that way. I'd love to network with not just the people that are panelists on there, but anybody that's interested, particularly in reaching communities that are particularly vulnerable right now. One of the things I'm realizing, especially this year, as we've been thinking about anti-Black racism more, is our organization is way too white, and we need to network with other communities, and we need to talk about the fact that advocacy is not always seen as a positive thing in some communities. Yeah. It's disrespectful of authority, or that in some communities disabilities are not recognized as valid. I have a lot to learn on that front, so I'd be interested in networking with people that way. I'm also going to share an acronym cheat sheet with Theresa, so those of you that are trying to navigate the special education spider web can maybe get a little bit of help with that. Thanks, Harvey.
Thanks, Laura. Theresa, your plug.
Well, I think the most important thing that we've done this year and that we need support for is we have opened Canada's first education bank. So we know food banks feed their bodies, but we're feeding their minds and spirits. And we start with the premise that every child deserves to be the prime minister, deserves to be Picasso, deserves to be the best sports star. And sorry, I don't know who to say because I don't watch sports.
That's okay.
But, too many people have said to me in my lifetime, well, their parents are doing this or I said, excuse me, they're a child. They are a child. It doesn't matter to me if their parents they're addicts, they are, they're just on welfare and people think they could work, whatever. I don't care. At the end of the day, they're children and they deserve support to raise them up to be their best potential. And that's what we're doing at the Education Bank. Everything we do is free of charge. Everything Parents Engaged in Education has ever done is free of charge. So kids come in, they get supplies, they get mental health resources, they get activities to do to raise their spirits, be it art kits or other things that they can do to have fun, journals for secondary kids to be having an outlet for their feelings and things like that. And then we're surrounding them with opportunities by partnering with great organizations that can offer them a leg up. And I think that's so important. We're doing speed mentoring ships. So we're asking companies to let these kids know that they're seen by corporate Canada, that they have the potential to work there, because the most discouraging thing for our racialized youth is we're telling them to work hard in school and they're saying, it doesn't matter. At the end of the day, I'm going to work at McDonald's. Yeah. No, at the end of the day, you're talking to Google. You're talking to HP, you're talking to Microsoft. These people see you. We're working with them to empower you. And the mentorship has their top people in it to give you advice how to get to that plan and accomplish it. That's what we have to do for kids. When I talk about starting equity really starts with this tangible result. And that is, books, whatever they need for school, they can get from us. And the opportunities to be great. We need your help. We are a wholly volunteer organization with no backing from the government. Surprise, surprise. Our lights will go off in August if we can't raise the money. So we are www.educationbank.ca, and whatever promotion you can do of our group and support, we greatly appreciate it.
Awesome.
Thanks, Theresa. And I will not forget the phrase opportunities to be great as well. What an work. Shameela?
Yep. So at York Communities, our primary focus is obviously York Region, but I work across the province with different organizations. So we're always open to having other parents, whether it's just, helping with any little thing. It doesn't have to be big things. As Laura said, sometimes you work within your capacity. So if it's stuff you can do from home, great, we'll take you. If it's stuff that you can do in the media, great, we'll take you. So a lot of it is just, working with us to work with our educators and our community advocates. And the biggest piece for us, similar to what Theresa's doing, is building up our youth. So we definitely, any opportunity we get, we include our high school students. So even, when it came to doing a delegation to York Region District School Board about several issues, we made sure that we included our youth in there. So if there are York Region students in either board, and YRDSB or the York Catholic Board, who are interested in getting more involved, I encourage you to reach out. And same thing with the parents and guardians who are out there who want to get more involved within the community, and just in any little way, encourage you to reach out. We're always looking for help. And I think the main thing is with our youth, anytime we see opportunities, so even within the media, I'll have like everybody here, I'm sure we get these media requests all the time. And even if I can't do it, or even if I can do it, sometimes I'll just say, I have an awesome high school student who would be really good to answer this question. Because you can ask me questions all day about what I think about, what my kids are doing in their bedrooms while they're doing virtual school. But it's not the same as hearing it from a grade 12 kid who feels kind of crappy because they know that they're not going to have prom, they're not going to have graduation, they barely got grad photos, like they're just, they're missing out on so many different things. So talk to them, so that I think that's it's one of the things that I love about your communities is that we're always encouraging the youth involvement. So anytime, like from any, across the province, I say just continue to push that up, put them up on a platform where they can build that confidence. They don't have to be perfect. We tell them all the time, like you're not going to know what to say all the time, and that's fine. Admit it, and then but it's a little mentorship thing. So we can help them as they're progressing towards post-secondary education, to build them up. That's the main thing we need to do, and just remind them that they're going to get to vote pretty soon, right? So a lot of our grade 12 students now, when we're having these virtual meetings, and I can hear them, and they'll pipe up and they'll, hold on, what does that mean? Because they're interested. They're going to be voting in, possibly the next 2 elections, federal and provincial, coming up. We need to make sure that they know what it all means and how we all fit and work together. That's it.
Thank you, Shameela. Nicole, your turn.
So much information. Oh my goodness, it's so amazing. So for us, I've got like these 2 things happening. So for the community of Black ECEs, some of the work that, if you know an early childhood educator who is Black in, whether it's a childcare center, full day kindergarten program, wherever they are working, if they haven't found a platform for them to share some of the things that they're going through at work, or just some of the things that they're experiencing, we welcome them to come and join the community of Black ECEs, where we get together, we share resources, we're networking with one another, we're doing mentorships for, high school students who are interested in becoming early childhood educators, trying to encourage them, to understand that, a lot of times people think of early childhood educators as just, changing diapers, or it's just babysitting. There's way more involved than, just changing diapers and babysitting, okay? Because it's not about that. So if you know anyone, if you know a young person who you see that is maybe like, you see how well they work with children, encourage them to reach out to us, so then we can step forward and just share some more information about why we need them in our field. And for Wondrous Educational Workshops, the other piece, one of the things that we do is, the workshops that we provide for our young people is just helping them to find their skills and their gifts and their talents, things that we find that are not happening in school. I think a lot of times in school, there are so many jobs out there that some of our young people have no clue about. And we try to introduce them to that. So if you are a person who knows of a job, I met somebody once who was able to share with our young people. They were the manager of a small airport, and it was something like, and the person loved it, so I'm thinking, jobs like that are, not known to many of our young people, we need to share that information. So if you know of anyone that has a job that you may think that a young person would like to know about or hear more about, or even in your position, a mentorship program in a sense, come and, hit us up at wondrousworkshops.org, or my email, nmorgan@wondrousworkshops.org. And we'd love to connect, get going. Well, yeah, that's it.
Thanks, Nicole. Given the quality of the responses, I could ask questions for hours, but I'm going to relinquish the reins here. I'm going to turn it over to Tracy, who will give the opportunity to viewers who may have questions, and Tracy will moderate the question and answer. So, Tracy Marshall.
Thanks.
Thanks, Harvey.
Thank you.
That was amazing. And I'm so excited and so energized. So I have a question on the screen. I think that mental health has been overplayed to the nines, and that students and parents alike are tired of the education on it. We need to be having more fun educational aspects coming. Does anyone have any suggestions regarding this? And the other part of a question that was on here as well was, we haven't really talked about foster children. So maybe we could incorporate that into the question. I just want to mention for people who are in the audience, we do have a question and answer feature. You'll see it on your screen. It says Q&A. You just click on it and you can open up and ask a question that way, and we'll answer it. Go ahead. I'm not sure, Harvey, if you want to moderate this or we just want to speak out. I'm not sure how you want that to work.
Oh, take it away, Tracy, if you want to.
Okay. Go ahead, Laura.
So I want to talk about foster children in the system, and I'm so glad that that question has been raised because you talk about marginalized group that's one that's terribly underserved and not talked about nearly enough. I think we all saw the writing on the wall with this government when one of the first actions that they took was closing the offices of one of the greatest champions of foster kids, and that was the provincial advocate for children and youth, Erwin Ellman.
Worse.
That was a devastating choice on the part of the government. So I'm not sure. I don't have any advice in particular about how to best help kids in the foster care system, but I know that they need champions. To the point on mental health, I'm going to respectfully disagree with the comment that mental health is overplayed. Certainly, I get the idea that, I mean, for as long as I've been in education, there are trendy topics, right? And one of the dangers with trendy topics is that schools and school systems tend to pay a little bit of lip service to it and then they move on. You know, when anti-bullying first came on the scene, it was like, okay, we did a bullying assembly, check. Hey, no more bullying. And of course, it's not that simple. But I can tell you as a classroom teacher, I am seeing very real mental health impacts, both in my own children and among my students. I'm doing a lot of check-ins, but I try to make them fun. So I have little memes and I'll be like, okay, so which picture of a dog best expresses your mood today? And I'll have like a goofy dog and a sleepy dog and a hyper dog. And so we can do both. We can do some mental health check-ins with kids and we can have some fun. But I think there are a lot of kids that need really intensive help with everything that they're going through right now. They've lost so much. And so, I mean, as a teacher, I just take a corner of my Google Classroom and I fill it with mental health resources so that it's just there. And we don't even have to talk about it beyond, the first day, but occasionally I'll point back to it. But I think the problems are real. And I wonder sometimes, how everybody uses that phrase, like when the pandemic is over. I wonder what it's going to be like when we go back into the schools, like all of us go back into the schools, because I'm pretty sure that the first time I stand in front of a group of 20 plus kids and they can like pass a pen to each other and work in groups, I'm pretty sure I'm going to cry. So we have to be ready for like, how are students going to react? The first time we go into an assembly, I'm definitely going to cry. So I'm okay with the fact that mental health is trendy right now because it's really important and the challenges are very real.
I agree.
Does
I
anyone
just want to add, oh yeah, okay.
Go ahead. I was going to say, does anyone else want to add anything? Go ahead, Nicole.
Yeah, I just want to add to, what Laura was saying. I think another reason why it may seem the way it seems too is also because we were never raised to really think about mental health. I mean, while some people think, oh, it's just, it's mental health, there's too much. We never thought about it. Like, I don't know about everyone else, but I know growing up, especially coming from a West Indian background, like our dealing with things was about just pray about it. Don't worry, you'll be fine. What do you mean you're having issues with your friends? What are you talking about? Your only job is to go to school. That's all you need to worry about. Not realizing that as a child, our only job really, yes, is to go to school, but everything that we do is about school. So when we're having issues at school, or when we see young people having issues at school, it is going to be mental health. It's going to affect their mental health, their social emotional development, their self-esteem. So I feel like, the way we look at mental health is just a way that we need to maybe we could take a different look and say, you know what? If we start as young as, this is where the early childhood education comes in, if we start early in encouraging our young people to understand, to take care of themselves, mental health is important, understanding how to deal with relationships. I see 4-year-olds who are able to say, I want to play with that child. So imagine a child being 4 and hearing another child say, I don't want to play with you. And when you think about these experiences that they have at school, now it's that association. Now this poor child has to go through school feeling like, when I was as young as kindergarten, people didn't want to play with me. The teachers didn't acknowledge it. My parents didn't acknowledge it. Now they've got to deal with this. They don't understand that maybe you need to write it out. You need to talk about it. So I think that, mental health is, I don't know. Like I said, I just feel like it is, as much as I know this person was saying, I can't remember exactly what the person said for the question, but basically along the lines that it's been played out. I think that's what I'm interpreting it as. Am I correct, Tracy? Is that what the person had said? Yeah. Okay. So I don't think it'll ever get played out, because until we can actually navigate, how to best deal with our mental health, it'll never be over.
I just want to add too, I think that it's really important to keep the conversations going around it, because I think we are helping to break down the barriers and the stigma around it. So I think that our kids, especially our teenagers, actually, even I'm thinking about my 10-year-old, they have language around the issue of mental health that none of us had, because they hear us talking about it. And so even, we'll be watching a TV show or a movie or something, and if there's a character, going through something or whatever it is, I think that their ability to identify now that, oh, that person's having a mental health issue, it's no longer saying, oh, that person's just crazy, like why are they like that? I think now they understand, oh, something, there's something going on. And I think the other piece to this is that as parents and educators, I think we're constantly saying, just reminding ourselves and also our kids to keep perspective in mind, right? So even whether we're on social media or in person, if somebody does come across as really aggressive, or somebody does come across as having a mental health issue, it reminds us to think about what has happened with that person. So even like Laura said, like when we get back to school, hopefully in September, kids are back in school, things are going to start to feel a little bit more normal, but we're going to have kids in the system who have lost siblings or parents or family members in the last year, right? We can't stop talking about mental health. We can't stop like downplaying it. So yes, we can try and figure out new ways to engage our kids and teens in terms of making it interesting for them, making them want to continue the conversation. So whether it's having, coffee times, I know a lot of high schools do this where they have whatever Tuesday or Thursday night, poetry and coffee, or, if it has to be online, that's fine. Pull the people together, have comedians, online to pull the people together, have whatever it is, like magicians. I don't even know what anymore, like does something fun.
Something fun.
But you got to keep bringing people together and continue to have these conversations, because when we get back to schools, there's going to be a whole host of new issues. Aside from the social pieces, it's the experiences that everybody have gone through in the last year that are really going to be showing the impacts in different ways. I think ways that we're not even going to be prepared for. I think as educators and as parents, it's going to be tough. So we need to continue it, and there has to continue to be funding to support those services at the school level and the community levels. So we all have to just keep fighting for that.
Yes.
Yeah, I would start with saying the reports coming out of CAMH and other agencies is that teen suicide is 4 times as prevalent now in the pandemic than it was pre-pandemic. So let's start there. So are we talking too much about mental health? I'm sorry. No, we have kids out there who can't handle it, and they're choosing to not be here rather than try and get a solution. So I will continue to talk about mental health till the cows come home. I do agree that we can be doing some fun things to support mental health. We can be giving them activities that are fun, not necessarily learning activities. Encourage them to paint, journal, get outside, kick a ball around, skip with a hula hoop, play, draw hopscotch on the ground, play tic-tac-toe outside in the park. We need them to have fun, and some of that will go a long way to helping their mental health. It's not just about pouring more counselors into the system. It's about looking at community services like ours and giving us the resources to help these kids become kids again and have fun. But I do worry. I said to my husband the other day, when all this is over, I don't know that I'm going to be comfortable going into a theater again, where I'm sitting side by side with people, where I'm corralling out with a lot of people. I just don't know if I'll get there again, that I'll have enough trust that something won't happen to me in that crowd, whether it's to catch a cold or, whatever. I think we're all going to feel more vulnerable being in crowded spaces, and our kids are in crowded schools. So if we throw them back there without recognizing this, we talk about an assembly, how we got to watch those kids who are going to the back of the room and standing up because they're afraid to sit side by side with other students. This has had a profound effect on our students. And these are the places we're going to see it. We're going to see kids who are not comfortable being in a group. They're not comfortable in labs where they're standing side by side to do science and things like that. I think we'll see a hesitancy towards socialization. And we have to recognize that and find ways to accommodate those changes when we go back to a somewhat normal system, and realize that as parents, we're having those concerns. Will we adapt to going back to what we used to know?
And do we want to go back to what we used to know?
Do we want to?
That's the other point. Okay, so there is another question here, and Theresa, you hit it right on at the same time. Suicide for teens has risen to alarming and outstanding rate. What should be done on a school level?
I just want to, can I start with that one? Just
Sure.
because I recently had a meeting. So I've been working with, as a resource teacher for grade 7 and 8. And one of the things that we're obviously dealing with is the fact that students are not coming in. A lot of the students that were on the IEPs that they were on, a lot of them had, it was anxiety, mental health, suicide watch prior to the pandemic. Mm-hmm. So one of the suggestions I made was, can we go to their house? So of course, this is where this whole piece of policy comes in, where they were like, no, Nicole, you can't do that. And I'm thinking, if we're really trying to reach our young people, to show them that we care, how am I going to reach them if I don't reach them? Like, if we're still sitting here sending emails, making phone calls, obviously on deaf ears and deaf eyes at this point, how are we truly going to make things work? So for me, when I think about that question, I think we need to really have parents advocate for a bigger movement in terms of what educators can do. And maybe policies need to be redesigned where we can have, educators who can and are willing to go to the house of a child, to say, hey, you know what, Shameela, we were thinking about you. We haven't seen you for a week. Is everything okay? I know that there's a lot of, other bureaucracy things that we need to think about, and there's a lot of red tape that we got to think about. But my point is if it's a student's like mental health, isn't it worth looking into? Isn't it worth considering, okay, what kind of tape can we release, right? So I just had to say that's the only thing for me is I think a personal connection is what I think would help for me.
Can I add on to that?
Of course.
I think you make such a good point. And I think as teachers, we're constantly trained on professional boundaries, right? And we have, entire documents that come to us from the College of Teachers about, you don't email, you don't contact kids on social media, you don't. And, look, there are teachers who abuse their authority, and we need to have professional boundaries. That being said, I've never quite gotten over a comment I got at a parent teacher night from somebody who said, I really want to invite you over for dinner. And I don't understand why in this country I'm not allowed to invite you to dinner, because in my home country, like in my town, it's practically a competition to see, like, teachers are honored members of the community, and we fight over who's going to get the teacher to come over for dinner. And like, so you talk about like, I've never struggled with professional boundaries. Like I know where to draw the line, but you, if you want to prevent suicide, you have to have a situation where there are multiple people in the school that a student feels comfortable turning to. And
Yeah.
often that's the frontline classroom teacher or another education worker. And we have to be more than robots who deliver curriculum. We have to be human. And when we show ourselves to be human to our students, when I can speak openly to my students as I do about my battles with anxiety and say, but hey, like, yeah, I have a diagnosed anxiety disorder, but look, like fully functioning professional woman, it's okay. When, and then like I've had other administrators who are like, oh, don't share that. You're crossing the line. Mm, I think we're going to need to normalize some stuff, and I think you're right, we may need to re-examine some of those hard rules about what we can and cannot do. I think, as a teacher, I'll do anything to save a life.
Yeah.
And if that means, going to a kid's house, if I can do it and not get in trouble for it, and I can get support from the administration at the school, let's do whatever we can to help these kids. They've already been through so much. I never want to be that teacher where a kid comes in at lunch and says, Miss, can I talk to you? And I go, I'm too busy.
Yeah. No, don't do
I never want to be that person.
it.
No, to that point, I would like to also encourage educators and parents that kids don't say, I want to kill myself
No,
as part of their common language. It's not part of their common language. We need to hear that and immediately act on it. From a personal standpoint, I'll tell you that, one day my daughter came home and said, she was saying something and she goes, I just want to kill myself. And I said, okay, everything stops right now. Let's sit down. Let's find out what's going on. So we got her help. What we found out happened is when she was 9 years old, we had a lightning strike in our house. And the equipment in our house all blew up in front of her. We never, we kind of all for a week went, wow, that was like crazy, right? What we didn't know is 4 years later, she had completely felt that home was no longer safe. And I had no idea. We took her and, the psychiatrist said to me, did something happen in your house like 4 years ago? And I went, not that I can think. Who even remembered that? Yeah, we had to replace the TV and the stereo and everything, but never occurred to us that it affected her feeling of stability and safety, because she felt anywhere she sat in the house, she could be in the middle of a crisis. So that built up in her such anxiety that she actually said, I could just kill myself. And I think too often we hear kids say that, we think,
we dismiss it.
That's part of your regular language. I could just kill yourself. No, it's not regular language. It's not right for a kid to say. So teachers, parents, please, if you hear that, take a complete stop and listen and try to get them to resources that they need. That's how these kids are getting to a state of suicide. No one's listening when they're trying to tell us, I'm not well. I want to kill myself. That is a real and present threat to that child.
Thank you so much. That was such a great personal share, and we appreciate it. I'm unfortunately, we're running out of time, so I'm going to turn it back to Harvey to end our lovely evening that we've had here tonight. Harvey?
Thanks, Tracy, and thanks so much to the panelists for their insight and for holding the powers that be accountable, advocating for all students, and being part of a remarkable community Community Coalition. I heard here this evening energy and commitment and intelligence and something that's rare, which is wisdom from all of our panelists. It was really an energizing kind of evening for me. I also want to thank the parents who viewed this evening. If you're interested in more information, you're welcome to visit hereforstudents.ca to sign up for advocacy opportunities, along with the ones that our panelists have offered you as well. Get more involved in ensuring that public education in Ontario remains robust, supportive, and accessible for all. I can also announce that Osstf FEESO will be holding other parent webinars in the summer, so please watch for that information. We hope that you'll be able to join us again. And for this evening, just, once again, a sincere thank you. Stay safe. Enjoy the rest of your evening.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, Harvey.
Thanks for holding the space, Harvey. Thank you so much.
Thanks.